All right, so first up in our reviews, like we said, we're in a little bit of a Netflix theme this month, is Marriage Story, and it's currently on Netflix, but premiered in a couple places, I think around the UK and a couple theaters. It also made its debut in New York at the Paris Theater, my favorite theater in New York, which had closed down, and it turns out that Netflix has bought a theater in New York, which is actually quite funny and also sort of ironic because it's called the Paris Theater and all of France hates Netflix. But I'm so excited about that in a lot of ways because when I come back to New York, I'll go to my favorite theater. And I think it's an interesting conversation we can have at another point. But back to Marriage Story, NOAH BAUMBACH wrote and directed this film. It stars Scarlett Johansson, Adam Driver, Laura Dern, Alda, and Ray Liotta. And as one can imagine, it's about the breakup of a marriage with a young son. It starts, where they're sort of deciding the separation to, the divorce and the divorce stage and all of the sort of conversations that go around that and, the pathways that it happens. It's also mostly about bi-coastal, so there's a very New York and LA sort of centric storyline. Of course, as everyone I think knows in this room, I'm a big NOAH BAUMBACH fan, and this film really did everything I needed it to do, particularly in my life stage right now. I really loved it. I thought the acting, of course, I think Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver are great actors, but I think they did such a wonderful job, and that Stephen Sondheim moment was so nice as well. So I would like to know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much agree. It's got quite a lot going on, actually. I mean, it's called Marriage Story, and it follows a divorce, but there's quite a lot of stuff going on beyond that. Like, there's quite interesting parallels between New York and LA from kind of like an American cultural standpoint, because basically what happens is, so it's kind of semi-autobiographical, right? So one of the main characters, Charlie, who's played by Adam Driver, is basically meant to be kind of a cipher for NOAH BAUMBACH himself. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of telling the story of his divorce from, is it Jennifer Jason Leigh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before he was with Greta Gerwig.
Yeah. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when Greta Gerwig watched this film. But so it follows that story, and basically the Charlie character is a theatre director. So the Scarlett Johansson character is the lead actress in his play. And she's given up kind of like various Hollywood opportunities to continue to do that. But when this separation comes about, she moves to LA to take up opportunities there, and it's kind of a little bit unclear what their future is. And you get this kind of interesting contrast between New York and Los Angeles. So there's that part to it. There is, of course, also the personal story of the two of them. And I think that is rooted very much in the performances. I think it's an excellent pair of performances. I don't think I'm quite as blown away by the film as a whole as, like, certainly I think you seem to be and some other folk are, but it is a real quality piece of work. It's well written. I didn't find it overwrought, which this story really could easily have been. It's got that kind of quirky naturalism that I suppose you'd think of Baumbach for, but it's also very low on whimsy. I mean, it's not a... When I say it's got a quirkiness to it, I don't mean it's a quirky film. It's more, it captures that kind of like everyday reverence that you use to get through situations like this, I suppose. So the performance is good, the script is good, and basically it just all comes together really rather well. I think with different performers it maybe wouldn't have landed quite as much, but it has those performances and it all really comes together quite superbly for me.
Yeah, me too. I liked it too. Even though I'm not, again, as people in this room know, I don't particularly, the ones I have seen, not particularly taken by Baumbach, more so by Greta Gerwig's stuff than his. I was kindly surprised by this and how much I liked it. I think, like, some issues aside, which include, like, I think, like, when the film pushes towards humor, like, certain jokes, I think, just fall flat.
Like which ones do you think?
I can't remember, but it was like I just felt by the time let me put it this way, by the time Alda got into the film, I was like, okay, here we go. This is the human comedic core. This, like, by the time Alan Alda got into the film, I was like, okay, I am sold on this film completely. And then by the time there's that scene where they're just screaming at each other, where Baumbach just lets them sort of have their Oscar moment, where it's like they're competing performances, if, you know, when, you know, Driver falls apart at the end of it. I thought that was really well done. There's even a shot that does directly invoke Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage.
Sure.
But this one, at times I was like, oh, this isn't Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage, because, you know, it's not this hardline, cynical, cold, doctor's view or counselor's view of marriage. But that's not what this film was really trying to be. It was trying to be, I think, something warm. And the cinematography, for me, this is his best looking film. I think, like,
oh no, we'll talk about some.
But in terms of like the 35mm, but like the choice of cinematography for the subject matter.
Yeah.
No matter how, you know, there's a line in the film that's, I think, even taken directly from Kramer versus Kramer, which is like, divorce lawyers see couples at their worst. I think that's the line. But this film sees, through the cinematography, this film sees people at their best, despite the fact that they're at their worst, that they are still human beings that are trying to figure this out, no matter how Machiavellian divorce proceedings can get between couples.
Sure.
And yeah, like that sudden musical moment, which, like, whether it's Cold War or Shape of Water, it's like whenever someone like goes on stage to express themselves through song or dance, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And Adam Driver, give him some vocal training. He's a great singer.
Yeah.
You see, the funny thing is, right, just to play devil's advocate, that moment didn't actually really do it for me. Like, I fully accept I'm in the minority.
Thespian, I mean,
oh no, Christ, no.
Oh, see, that's
no,
the
no.
thing.
I am fully willing to accept that's why. But it's just interesting because, like, that seems to be, you know, without spoiling it, it's basically a moment towards the end of the film, right? And it kind of seems to bring a nice close to Charlie's arc, if you like, and like where he ends up at the end of the film. But I don't know, it's just something about my makeup. It didn't really do it for me. The rest of it I found much better, which isn't to say I think it's bad. It's more just it didn't have the same impact on me. I think a lot of the chat around this film and the performances will focus on Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. I think it is worth talking about the supporting performances as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really adds a lot of colour to the film, and I think it balances the tone that Noah Baumbach is going for quite well. Because obviously there's a lot of humour here. Now, for me, not all of it works 100%. Like, I wasn't fully sold on the wife's family and the mother in particular. I felt like that had kind of been parachuted in from a different film, to be honest with you. It felt like it was a lot more whimsical than some of the other ones. But
now that you remind me, that's the whole pie sequence where she's meant to serve him with the papers, and the sister, there's that whole thing. It was like, why is she carrying a pie? I was like, is this meant to be funny? Okay.
What did you say? I was all right. To be honest, I was all right with that bit. It was more just there was something about the tone of those interactions that just didn't sit right. Because the rest of it, even when it is ramped up to be a little bit caricaturish, it's all quite naturalistic, right? I mean, it all feels pretty genuine. That didn't to me. But that aside, a lot of the supporting performances really give it that tone it needs. In particular, the ones that I'm really thinking of here are Ray Liotta, Alan Alda, and Laura Dern, who play basically the various lawyers that both of them interact with. Because the entire point of this process and separation is, we want to do it without lawyers, and then obviously, you know, it's not a spoiler to say that obviously that completely descends, and that's not the case. But those supporting characters, I think, do a lot to set that tone of balancing this kind of heartbreak and personal anguish with humour, right? Because, you know, just because these things happen doesn't mean there aren't things that are funny, things you find humorous. And I think that those supporting characters are what balance that tone quite well. And Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's characters are pretty straight. You know, I mean, like Adam Driver does quite a good job of reacting incredulously to things, right? That it's like he's very underrated in that department. But their characters are overall fairly straight. So the balancing of the tone that I think Baumbach wanted to go for is done very well by those supporting characters, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them get a little bit of recognition as this kind of rumbles on.
Yeah, I think Laura Dern's character for me was my favorite. I'm particularly a huge Laura Dern fan, and I think we were talking about this earlier, that it's almost kind of an evolution of, if you've seen Big Little Lies, like a similar kind of character. Really, really funny. Also, really, like her ability to kind of, I like the one scene when she's talking to Charlie about his work and right, and then jumps right back into firing the good lawyer, the good lawyer that she is.
MacArthur grad.
But yeah, I mean, incredible.
Also, I would have liked to have seen more of him, but Wallace Shawn as well. He was part of the New York theatre group. He was particularly funny, but it's like a few more scenes would have been really nice with him.
Yeah, no, I think that what you said, Jim, about this New York versus LA thing, I think it's also kind of interesting because I feel like a lot of artists go through that process of deciding, and it's been funny because over the years of living in New York, LA was kind of like the evil, like brother, sister to New York. And then I've noticed that a lot of filmmakers, not only because maybe they're moving to LA, but have sort of become kind of interested in moving to LA now that it's perhaps become a little bit more hipster or whatnot. So I loved that kind of setting as kind of part of the themes of deciding as an actor or director or creative, where they place themselves, and also where they place a relationship that takes over your life in a lot of ways, and how you can kind of create, how there can be competition within a relationship when we're dealing with creatives and artists, but there can also be this loss of self and our ability to create through that as well. So I just thought that was so well articulated in this story.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the way it portrays that central relationship is very well done, and it's very interesting, because I've not really seen a lot of films that do that well, in the sense that they balance that idea of, you've got this strong central relationship where there is a single entity that forms out of it, right? But then if that breaks down and people go their separate ways, or even if they become frustrated within that unit, how do you go about finding a way to reforge your own identity? It's like, who you are, but you need to find your way back to it almost. And I think for both of those characters, I think it does that really, really quite well. And I think it does it without favouring... I am of the opinion, I've seen, other opinions are available, trademark, but I don't think it favours one character over the other.
No.
I don't think it's equally balanced at all points in the film. Like, I don't think it's kind of like doing that juggling act throughout. I think it swings from one back to the other, but I don't think it particularly considers one character to be in the right. It's portraying the difficulty of navigating this divorce, and I think that it does very well. And I think anybody who's been through a breakup will probably be able to relate to at least aspects of that. Even if it's maybe everything, because there's the kid involved, and everything's a little bit kind of like more set in its ways, it's maybe, amplified. But I think there's a lot to relate to in that central relationship, for sure. And
I think also this idea of like the expectation of the ideal the relationship breakup. I mean, I started to think about that movie Breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Ben, and how not good that was. And for a while I was like, oh, that's pretty good, but how so true to these kinds of situations this really catches, where you might have these aspirational ideas on how you want things to happen, but emotions and energies take over, and life moving, locations and practicalities and stuff, and it just does such a nice way of combining, like you said, a little bit of humor that comes out of that stuff, and also intensity.
Oh, also, I found I completely agree with Jim. I found myself at the beginning kind of going with Adam Driver. It's like, why would you move to LA and all this stuff? It's like, her reasons were unclear, but like it brilliantly like vacillates between the mindset. You're always either in Adam Driver's or Scarlett Johansson's head, particularly like the bits where they finally decide like that the lawyers are going to take care of this, and you're going, what the hell? And then whether it's like, you know, her taking certain actions against him or him taking actions as per, like, you know, finally settling on Ray Liotta as his lawyer, as this hotshot lawyer, that, you know, he's upping his game. So I found that as well, is that you actually, by the midpoint of the film, you see that both people are so emotionally crippled, particularly the driver character, and he's so in the wrong as well.
Yeah, but then ultimately he wasn't the one who did the breaking up, correct? Like, so there's this really interesting sort of thing to say, well, you would feel for the person in one situation who was broken up with, but then you can see what Scarlett Johansson's...
I think one thing that is done very well on the Adam Driver side, not that I want to favour one over the other, but there was something about, and it feels like a particular aspect I only feel of actors of that sort of like generation Adam Driver seems uniquely placed to do, is that kind of like strange combination of arrogance and vulnerability. Like, I think that is balanced superbly in this film. Like, at times he comes across as just the most arrogant arsehole imaginable, but at the same time he still retains you still retain a little bit of sympathy and empathy, particularly towards the end of the film when, you know, things escalate basically. But like, the performances are really what make this film. I think they wouldn't have as much to work with without the script, which obviously comes from Baumbach, and, you know, the way that he approaches the shooting of the film. But really it is those central performances, and as we've discussed, the supporting ones that really make the film, I think.
Well, and one of the things I was asked you guys about is, you know, where you see this, and I mean, I think you both have different opinions of Noah Baumbach, but then you look at this Adam Driver, and he's in about, I think, at least 3 films, if it could be more. I sort of see him in a very similar way that, like, when Woody Allen would play himself and sort of articulate, or he, near the later part of his career, would add some new characters in who would always play the Woody Allen character. That Adam Driver is particularly taking on that role in Noah Baumbach as he's growing into his own kind of, you know, relationship, social commentary filmmaker of New York.
As with much of the Woody Allen surrogates, I think Noah Baumbach's been quite kind to himself there as well. Like, his Adam Driver's quite a good looking guy. He's about 5 inches taller than him.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm sure it's totally that way, but you can definitely see that about him in general. As, I mean, you know, but yeah, no, I definitely see that he kind of becomes that, you know, with, I think, When We Were Young, or what that film was, he sort of played that role of some sort too, and so I guess Ben Stiller did more for him. But anyway, yeah,
he does really, not just because of Kramer versus Kramer. He does remind me of Dustin Hoffman. Of like, so if you look at Adam Driver, he's playing this, and then in 2 weeks he's in Star Wars. Before that, it was Dead Don't Die, and then The Report. Look at, like, Dustin Hoffman, he does Tootsie, but then before that he did like Kramer versus Kramer, and, you know, All the President's Men. So and all, like, Dustin Hoffman is very short, Adam Driver is very tall, yes, but they are, you know, chameleons, like, in that way, and being able to, like, vacillate between two, you know, the mainstream and the sort of more Oscar heavy.
You could say the same thing for Scarlett Johansson, though. I mean, you know, Avengers and whatnot.
Yeah, Adam Driver seems to be on a real run of it right now, though, because, I mean, of course, there was a report, which I don't think actually seems to have ended up as well regarded as they hoped, but there's that, there's Marriage Story, there's the Star Wars films, and then also, because I didn't think this was going to get a release, but just to kind of, I suppose, finish this section off, Adam Driver will have another probably reasonably interesting release in January, because The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, Terry Gilliam's film, which was stuck in development and then distribution hell for a very long time, is actually getting a release in towards the end of January in the UK. So Adam Driver's on a real run of, like, actually really interesting and diverse roles. All
from the show, from starting as girls and Showgirls.
Yeah.
Unrequited Love. All right, well, that's on Marriage Story. If you didn't think we liked it, that would be shocking. We very much did, and so if you're a Netflix subscriber, maybe check it out.